Hi there, I'm Linnea, and this is the story of how my husband told me to get out of the home I paid for. Me and our son. No warning, no remorse, just leave. But what if I told you that wasn't the worst part? What if I told you the man I once trusted didn't just abandon us? He tried to bury me, professionally, emotionally, and legally. Ever wondered how far someone will go to avoid responsibility? Stick around. You're not ready for what came next. Seattle felt heavier than usual that morning, like the clouds had been holding their breath just as long as I had. The sky pressed low, gray and unmoving, but inside the apartment, the pressure was different, denser, sharper. Jace was already pacing the kitchen when I came out. His phone lit up the counter, half a podcast playing in the background, some tech bro ranting about how women complicate ambition. I grabbed a mug without saying anything. "You know you really don't need the organic creamer," he muttered, eyes glued to the fridge door. "That stuff's overpriced junk." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because we'd had this exact conversation, verbatim, too many times. And every time, it chipped something loose. "You hear me?" he asked, louder this time. "That's why we're always tight. You throw money at dumb crap like it grows on trees." I turned slowly, my hand still wrapped around the coffee mug. "You mean like the $2,000 amp you bought last month that's sitting in the closet under a blanket?" Silence. He didn't even flinch. "That's an investment." "Right, so is our marriage. Once." He shifted gears, changing the subject like he was flipping a channel. "My parents are probably going to come up next month. I was thinking they could stay here a while. Get out of that dusty condo. Mom's arthritis is getting worse." It wasn't the words that got me. It was the tone. Flat. Expecting. I stared at him. "Stay here? In this apartment?" "Why not? It's your place technically, but it's ours now." "No, Jace, they can't move in here. You didn't even ask me," he scoffed. "Jesus, it's always me with you. They're my parents. You act like they're intruders." "This apartment isn't built for 4 adults and a child," I said evenly. "And I already cover everything here. Rent, groceries, Milo's school supplies. You think I can take on more?" His lip curled. "You know what? Maybe you and Milo should just go then. If it's such a burden to live with my family, maybe you don't belong in this house at all." I didn't move. The words hung there like a slap that hadn't quite landed. I think he expected me to cry, or plead, or fight. But I didn't. I blinked once, then again. And then I said, "Okay." He paused. "Wait, what?" I walked past him, not looking back. My voice stayed steady. "You want us out? We'll go." Behind me, he laughed nervously. "Don't be dramatic. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." I kept walking. I stepped into Milo's room. He was sitting cross-legged on the bed, sketching something with his back to the door. I didn't have to say a word. He had heard everything. He turned around slowly. "Are we leaving?" "Not today," I said softly, "but soon." He nodded. No tears, just acceptance, a kind of quiet that scared me more than anything. I sat beside him, brushing my hand through his hair. He didn't lean into it, but he didn't pull away either. That night, while Jace slept in the other room, snoring without shame or care, I sat in the dim glow of my laptop. The keys felt cold under my fingers as I typed, "Last-minute moving service, Seattle." "You asked me to leave, Jace, so I will. But when I go, I'm taking the silence with me." I didn't cry after he told me to leave. I didn't scream or throw a mug. That would have felt like giving him something he didn't deserve. My reaction. Instead, I boiled the kettle, made tea I didn't drink, and stared out the window long after the steam disappeared. The city was silent. Even the traffic below felt like it was holding its breath. So was I. But not anymore. I opened the banking app on my phone. Not to move money, just out of habit. Or maybe to make sure he hadn't touched it. But he had. A $3,000 charge to Studio Soundworks. He drained the joint account down to less than $50. That was when the quiet in my chest turned to steel. "I'll pick up some extra shifts," he'd said 2 weeks ago when the rent posted, and I'd asked if he could cover even a fraction of it. "I've got a few things lined up. Just give me time, Linnea." What he lined up instead was a brand new mic setup. Fancy cables. Maybe another empty promise to some bar venue. 16 years ago, I believed him when he said he was on the verge. He had that raw charm, boyish, unfiltered, full of stage adrenaline. But that energy never matured into action. I didn't realize then that charisma could be currency, and I was the only one paying. I booked the movers before I could hesitate. A last-minute service that didn't ask questions, just a window of time and an address. I gave them both. I made a list. Things that mattered, things that didn't, and things I would leave behind just to make a point. His guitars? Untouched. The rack of amps he cared more about than Milo's reading scores? Also untouched. But the dining set I bought with my first paycheck? Gone. The couch we both knew I saved up for while he waited for royalty checks? Absolutely gone. The removal men were efficient, even kind. They asked once, just once, "You sure about this?" And I smiled. I've never been more sure about anything. They didn't push. I packed Milo's things myself. His sketchbooks, his headphones, that old hoodie he always insisted still fit. He helped quietly, folding his clothes with more care than I expected for an 11-year-old. At one point, he looked up and asked, "Do we have to rush?" "No," I said. "We're not rushing. We're reclaiming time." By noon, the place was empty. I stood in the middle of the room where the rug used to be and stared at the blank walls like they were mirrors. Without our things, without our energy, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a shell. On the fridge, I left a single yellow sticky note. "Do not mistake silence for surrender." That was all. We checked into a hotel with stale carpet and too many light switches, but Milo didn't complain. He opened the minibar fridge, laughed at the tiny bottle of soda, and asked if we were officially on vacation. "Something like that," I told him. That night, while he slept with one hand curled under his cheek, my phone lit up. It was Jace. First a call, then another, then a text. "Where the hell is everything?" I didn't reply. Tomorrow he'd find out. He called 6 times before noon. I didn't answer once. Jace must have walked into the apartment and found only echoes. No couch, no dining table, no sign of us, not even a spoon in the drawer, just his equipment, the holy relics he worshipped more than any responsibility. The silence probably felt louder than any fight we ever had. The texts came after that. "What the hell is this? Where's all the stuff? You think this is funny?" I turned my phone face down. I had nothing left to say that he was willing to hear. Later that day, I sat at the kitchen table in the hotel room, scrolling through bank transactions, prepping for the inevitable legal storm. That's when I saw them. 5 transfers labeled reimbursement. They were spaced out, each under $600, just enough to avoid triggering my email alerts. The recipient's name didn't register at first, but then it hit me. Melissa, blonde, used to play bass in his band. I hadn't seen her since that one barbecue years ago where she wore heels to a lawn party and called me the science wife. I pulled up her profile. The top post, "New gear, new era," with a photo of the same interface Jace claimed he was still saving for. He couldn't afford groceries, but he could subsidize someone else's setup. I wasn't jealous. I was offended. This wasn't just about lies. It was about what he thought he could get away with. He spent our shared money on a woman he used to flirt with on tour, all while calling me rigid for asking him to buy Milo new sneakers. And somehow, he still thought he had the moral high ground. Milo's birthday fell on the weekend. I told myself I'd keep things peaceful. I let Jace come to the party we'd planned in the community center's rec room. It wasn't much. Cupcakes, streamers, music. But Milo smiled, and that was enough. At least until Jace opened his mouth. He stood by the snack table, holding court like he always did when he had an audience. "She's the real MVP," he said, nodding toward me with a fake grin. "I mean, I'm the one doing bedtime and morning drop-offs while she's out saving the world one lab sample at a time." Some parents laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was easier. I kept my face still, but something inside me shifted. Something final. Milo looked up at me from across the room. His eyes narrowed. He was old enough to recognize passive-aggressive garbage when he heard it. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. After the party, I stepped outside, letting the cool air cut through the tension still buzzing under my skin. 16 years ago, I said yes to a man with talent and no roadmap. I skipped a trip to Yosemite to pay for his demo. I worked weekends while he made playlists and called it branding. I waited. I forgave. I covered rent, bills, dreams, and this was how he said thank you. I opened the Notes app on my phone, created a new file, evidence financial, verbal, emotional. First bullet point, reimbursements to Melissa. Second, birthday comment. I do most of the parenting. He wanted escalation, fine. I could show him what truth looks like when it's weaponized. His voice still echoed in my head. I do most of the parenting while she climbs ladders in a lab. He said it with a grin, like he was charming the room, like it was some inside joke. But no one was laughing, not really. Just a few uncomfortable chuckles, polite nods, and eyes that drifted to the floor. What bothered me more wasn't what he said. It was wondering how many believed him. How many stood there thinking, maybe she is too cold, too ambitious, too absent. That's the part that stung. Not the lie, but how easily it slid into the silence of others. I carried that silence with me for days. It lingered in my spine while I typed reports at work, clung to my skin as I loaded the dishwasher at the hotel kitchenette. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I had learned the value of withholding. Then came the message from Tara, a mutual friend from way back. She'd always played the neutral observer, orbiting us in that safe middle distance, but never quite stepping into the mess. She sent me a voice memo, no preface, just, "You should hear this." I sat down before I hit play. The audio was clear. Jace's voice carried over bar clatter and a laugh I didn't recognize. She's just a paycheck with a pulse, always acting like she's got the moral high ground because she works in a lab, but I'm the one holding the damn family together. A pause, then more laughter. I closed my eyes. Not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. I saved the file, labeled it plainly, Exhibit A. The next afternoon, I came home from work early. The room was quiet, too quiet. Milo wasn't in the lobby, not at the desk, not in the hall. His backpack wasn't on the hook. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no texts, nothing. I called Jace, straight to voicemail, again, voicemail. By the third time, I was pacing the room like it would give me answers. Then came the text. Relax, he's with me. He needs a break from the drama. That word, relax, landed like a slap. No permission, no heads up, just disappearance. He knew exactly what he was doing, knew what buttons to press. He'd yanked Milo out of my world for a few hours and left me drowning in not knowing. Milo came back that evening, walked in like it was any other day, holding a bag of fast food and a balloon from some game center. I didn't yell, didn't lecture. I just knelt in front of him and asked, "Did you have a good time?" He nodded slowly, chewing his lip, then hesitated. Dad said I needed to remember who's really here for me. That line, it didn't come from Milo. It came through him. Jace wasn't just crossing lines now. He was redrawing the entire map. That night, I tucked Milo into bed. My hands shook as I pulled the blanket over his shoulders. He reached for my hand, squeezed once, then turned away. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breath settle. Inside me, something cracked, or maybe something hardened. I opened my laptop, created a folder titled Custody Plan, dropped Exhibit A into it, then opened my voice recorder and whispered, "He crossed a line today." The question came over breakfast. Quiet, casual, like he was asking if we had any more orange juice. "Mom, why don't you want me to see Dad and Grandma?" I froze. The knife hovered above the toast. My breath caught in my chest. He didn't look up. He just kept stirring his cereal, like the words didn't slice something open inside me. I set the knife down, wiped my hands slowly. "What makes you think that?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. He shrugged. "Dad said it seems like you're trying to keep me away. Grandma said, you only act nice when you want something." It landed like gravel in my lungs. I didn't react. Didn't raise my voice. I had made a promise to myself months ago, never to let Jace turn me into the villain he needed me to be. Instead, I crouched next to Milo and looked him in the eye. "And what do you believe?" He didn't answer, just looked away. That silence said more than any words could. Not because he agreed, but because he didn't know what to believe anymore. I had spent years protecting him from our adult mess, keeping the tension quiet, the doors shut when we argued, whispering instead of yelling. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe he needed to see the fractures so he wouldn't start thinking I had created them. I let him finish his breakfast in peace. But inside, something cracked, and it didn't heal by evening. Just after sunset, I got the call. It wasn't Jace's voice, it was a woman's. "I'm at Harborview. He collapsed during practice, they rushed him here." I was already grabbing my keys, but something didn't sit right. "What's his name?" I asked. A pause. Jace Stroud." I hung up and dialed the hospital directly, gave them his name. No one by that name had checked in. I tried another hospital. Same answer. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged again. This time it was him. "You didn't care. Not even when you thought I was dying." Another ping. "I just wanted to feel like I mattered. I thought maybe if you thought I was in danger, you'd come." I sat on the edge of the bed, my stomach hollowed out. Not from worry anymore, but from disbelief and rage. He faked a medical emergency just to manipulate a response. And the worst part? It wasn't even the first time he'd twisted something for attention. But this was new. This was desperate. I stared at the wall for a long time before I replied, and then I didn't. Some things don't deserve answers. Later that night, I parked outside the old condo. Lights off, curtains drawn. I didn't go in. I didn't even step out of the car. I just sat there staring at the building we used to call home, listening to the rain tap against the windshield like it had something to say. In my mind, Jace's words echoed again. "You're trying to make him hate us." And for the first time I spoke back, quietly to no one. "No, but he needs to see who you really are." I stared at the hospital photo again, the one he sent with the text that read, "Collapsed at rehearsal, heart issues, at Harborview." His skin looked pale, his eyes glassy. He'd cropped out the IV tubing, probably to look more pitiful. The lighting was wrong, too bright for a hospital triage room. Something about it kept scratching at the back of my mind. I uploaded the image to a metadata reader. Timestamp, February 14th, 3 years ago. File name, IMG_2314_edit. That was the same week he had food poisoning from sushi. I remembered, because he had accused me of trying to poison him with cheap fish after I suggested the place near my lab. I called the hospital directly. No one by his name had been admitted, anywhere in Seattle. He staged a fake medical emergency to guilt me, to make me show up, drop everything, run to his side. He wasn't reaching for my sympathy. He was trying to manipulate my presence. "You wanted to fake vulnerability?" I whispered to the screen. "I'll show you what real exposure looks like." I dropped the photo and confirmation into my custody folder. The next morning, I drove Milo to school. We didn't speak much. He fiddled with the zipper on his jacket. I handed him his lunch as he got out. He paused before shutting the door and asked, "Mom, are you mad at Dad?" I looked at him. Not through him, not over him, at him. "I'm disappointed," I said. "There's a difference." He nodded slowly. That was all. He knew something was coming. I could see it in the way he didn't run into school like usual. He walked. By noon, the courier arrived. The receptionist knocked on my office door, holding a manila envelope with a bright red sticker. Time sensitive. Inside, on crisp letterhead, was Jace's next move. A pre-litigation custody challenge. He'd retained an attorney. It was all there. Legal language meant to bruise beneath the skin. Emotional instability. Neglect through overwork. Hostile parental alienation. My heart didn't pound. My stomach didn't drop. I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I was ready. I opened my laptop, clicked on the folder labeled Custody Plan, and began compiling. Photos, screenshots, financial trails, audio recordings, the hospital metadata report. Everything. Neat, precise, timed. Then I called Iris. She picked up on the second ring. "It's starting?" "Yup," I said. "He wants war. And he's going to get it." There was no tremble in my voice, no room for it. Just the cold steel of a mother who'd been underestimated for far too long. That night, after everyone else had left the office, I turned off the lights and sat for a while. The building hummed quietly, the kind of stillness that feels like you're underwater. I whispered into the dark, "This isn't survival anymore. This is strategy." The subject line read, "Urgent, formal concern regarding parental conduct." I stared at it for 10 seconds before clicking. My stomach didn't drop, my pulse didn't quicken, but something shifted in my spine, like my body knew before my mind caught up. It was anonymous, of course. Cold, clinical. The language was textbook HR. It has come to our attention that an employee may be struggling to maintain an appropriate work-life balance, which could be affecting her ability to provide consistent childcare. I could hear his voice in it, not literally, but in the way it was laced with half-truths. Subtle enough to sound reasonable, sharp enough to cut through reputation. For the first time, he'd gone after my job. The next morning, I sat in a glass conference room with HR. The air conditioning hummed too loud. A copy of the anonymous complaint was printed and highlighted. Yellow lines under phrases like excessive travel, child left unattended, erratic behavior. I pulled out a manila folder. Inside, Milo's school attendance records, copies of my lab's time log system, email chains from his teachers thanking me for my involvement in parent meetings. I placed everything on the table, one by one, methodical. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. When they asked if I had anything to say, I just said, "I don't make claims. I present facts." They nodded, wrote things down, promised to follow procedure. But I knew what mattered most. I had shown them who I was and what I wasn't. As I left the building, my phone buzzed. A message from Iris. He filed. "Petition's in. We're officially at war." Later that evening, I met Iris in her office. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The window was cracked, letting in the last of the autumn chill. "He's not just pushing for shared custody," she said. "He wants full." Of course he did. She handed me a printed copy of the filing. I scanned it fast. Emotionally unstable, prioritizes career, lacks maternal instinct. My favorite part? A screenshot of a text thread where I'd asked Jace not to call after 10 p.m., cited as evidence of emotional distancing. I set the paper down, opened my laptop, and clicked through folders. "Here," I said, pulling up the audio of his fake ER stunt. "Here's the metadata on that hospital photo. Here's his wire transfers to that girl in Tacoma. Here's the note he left on Milo's report card. He forgot to sign it as me." I looked up. My voice didn't shake. "Let's hit back, not with noise, with precision." Iris smiled like a soldier recognizing another in uniform. The next morning, my response was filed. It was short, sharp, ironclad. He wasn't just wrong, he was exposed. And still, he couldn't help himself. That afternoon, he posted a status update on social media. Some people would rather bury you than admit their own darkness. He always did have a flair for drama. I didn't comment. I didn't call. I just sent a copy of the post to Iris with one line. "Let's see who gets buried." The email subject line was too polished to be innocent. Feature request. Balancing motherhood and professional success. Media inquiry. I read it twice before forwarding it to Iris. The name on the signature, Andrea Lane, had no LinkedIn, no press history, no digital footprint at all. In a city like Seattle, that was impossible unless you were trying to stay invisible on purpose. 2 hours later, Iris called. "It's a trap," she said, blunt and calm. "The media arm of Jace's lawyer funds a few pop-up blogs like this. They've used them before to seed doubt online." I didn't respond right away. "I'll draft a response," she added. "You'll decline, kindly, publicly." "Let them bait someone else," I said. "Not me." By the end of the day, I had posted a simple, clear rejection on my professional account. While I support all conversations around work-life balance, I will not be participating in interviews while in the middle of a personal custody process. Privacy and integrity remain my priorities. The post did what it needed to, but Jace still spun it. He always did. He posted a real-style video, filtered in black and white, voiceover with piano music behind it. "She says she's protecting our son. I just want a chance to be present." Comments poured in. "She sounds cold. He just wants to be a dad. I bet she's using the court system to control him." I didn't respond, didn't post, didn't scroll. I let the wave rise and waited for it to break. Then Iris released a short press brief, backed with documentation, time logs, school references, screenshots of Jace's own messages about skipping visits for studio nights. This wasn't about winning hearts. It was about showing receipts. By the time we stepped into the courtroom, the air had already shifted. He showed up in a suit one size too big, hair slicked back like a job interview gone wrong. He smiled at the bailiff, winked at the court reporter. His charm act was in full performance mode. Until he started speaking, his claims were rehearsed. She's cold. She isolates Milo from my family. She works too much to give him emotional consistency. Then came the so-called evidence, screenshots of texts where I set boundaries, videos of me raising my voice during a single disagreement, taken out of context and cut short. Then it was my turn. I stepped forward, calm, factual, methodical, financial records showing I covered 97% of Milo's expenses for 5 years. Audio of Jace mocking Milo's school and suggesting he'd be better off homeschooled so I can tour. Metadata from the fake hospital photo, letters from Milo's teachers praising my presence and support. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. When it was over, the judge didn't take long. Primary custody awarded to Dr. Caldwell. Supervised visitation granted to Mr. Stroud under weekly review. Jace didn't react immediately. It was almost like he hadn't processed it. Then I watched his mouth tighten, eyes flicking to the floor. He didn't look angry. He looked lost. Outside, he collapsed into the passenger seat of his mother's car. She didn't speak, just started the engine and drove off slowly. I stood at the curb, watching until their car disappeared around the corner. I turned to Iris. He never thought I'd really fight back. She didn't smile. She just said, "But you did." The facility was quiet, sterile in a way that felt almost cruel. I sat next to Milo in the small waiting room, my fingers gently brushing against his sleeve. He hadn't spoken much that morning. I hadn't pushed. Some things were already written in the silence between us. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Every second dragged, heavy and expectant. When the counselor came to call us in, Milo didn't move right away. Eventually, he stood, small but grounded. We entered the room, and he took his seat across from the empty chair that would soon belong to his father. The door opened a minute later. Jace stepped in, smiling like it was some reunion special on a talk show. His eyes scanned the room, landed on Milo, and softened. He opened his arms slightly. "Hey, bud, I've missed you." Milo didn't move. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink. The counselor offered a gentle prompt. "Milo, would you like to say anything?" Milo looked down at his hands, then back at Jace. "You never listened," he said quietly. Not with anger, not with sadness, just truth. Jace froze. His face shifted, like a crack spreading across glass. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I watched through the two-way mirror. I didn't feel triumph. There was no joy in that room, just stillness. Later that week, I got a message from Iris. No appeal, no follow-up motions, just silence. Apparently, his parents had pulled the plug too. No more help, no more checks. He'd moved into a studio sublease near Capitol Hill, solo. It was the first time in over a decade that Jace Stroud was truly, completely alone. Meanwhile, Milo and I moved again. This time, not out of fear, but for peace. The apartment was smaller. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, ugly carpet. But the light came in warm every morning, and we filled it with books, plants, and the sound of real laughter. I started budgeting again, old habits from my early 20s. But it felt good, grounding, like I was building something instead of patching something broken. Milo started sleeping through the night. He stopped asking why things fell apart. Instead, he started asking how things worked. He began painting again. I found 3 of his drawings taped to my office wall one morning: a mountain, a small house, and a single bright sun. One night, I sat down and opened my journal. Not the digital one, the old leather one I used back in grad school. I wrote, "It was never about revenge. It was about ending the cycle. The wounds are still here. They probably always will be. But healing doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a kid laughing in the next room. Sometimes it's not answering a message that doesn't deserve a reply. That message came at 11:42 p.m., 3 weeks after the hearing. I hope he forgives me someday. I didn't respond. I just deleted it. And that was the last time I heard from him. Sometimes we wait too long to fight back because we think silence means strength. But real strength? It's choosing not to stay silent when silence becomes survival. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that boundaries are not betrayals. Protecting yourself and your child doesn't make you cruel. It makes you a parent, a whole person. And no one, not even someone you once loved, has the right to rewrite your worth. To anyone watching this who's stuck in a relationship where you're constantly doubting yourself, second-guessing your instincts, or shrinking to make someone else feel taller, please know, your calm is not weakness. Your clarity is not cruelty. And walking away doesn't mean you've lost. Sometimes it means you finally won. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where staying silent felt easier than standing up? What would you say to your younger self if you were in my shoes? Or better yet, what advice would you give someone who's still living in the storm? If this story touched you, drop a 1 in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And hey, if this wasn't your vibe, that's okay too. Tell me why and what you'd rather see next. Let's build a space that's honest, raw, and real. And don't forget, if this story moved you or made you think twice, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next one. I've got more stories to share, and maybe, just maybe, one of them will feel a little like yours.